It all started on the night of July 10th, 2016, in the bustling city of Taipei, Taiwan. Two men walked up to an ATM carrying empty backpacks. Not an unusual sight. But what happened next was anything but ordinary. They didn't insert any cards, didn't type in a pin. Instead, they just stood there, waiting. Moments later, the machine suddenly went wild, spitting out stacks of cash like confetti at a celebration. Bills were flying everywhere. Calmly, the men scooped up the money, stuffed it into their backpacks, and disappeared into the night. That wasn't the end of it. Throughout the evening, the duo hit up 22 different ATMs, repeating the same strange process. No cards, no passwords, just perfect timing, and the machines did the rest. Over the next week, they went on to collect millions of dollars from 41 separate machines. These ATMs have been silently taken over by a crew of expert-level hackers. But this wasn't just a local job. What happened in Taiwan was only the surface, just a glimpse of a much bigger operation. Behind the scenes, a highly organized hacker syndicate had breached the internal systems of banks and financial institutions in over 30 different countries. Their digital heist? It brought in more than $1.2 billion. So how did they pull it off? Let's rewind to August 2015. Somewhere in Europe, an employee at one of the continent's top banks received an email from a supposedly high-value client. The message claimed there was suspicious activity in their account. Something about the balance sheets not matching. Attached to the email was an Excel file, asking the employee to take a look. Worried, and thinking it was just a routine concern, the bank worker opened the file. What he saw was a jumbled chart full of odd numbers and unreadable text. It didn't make sense, so he decided to ignore it for the time being. What he didn't realize was that by simply opening that file, he had unknowingly invited a powerful piece of malware into the bank system. After office hours, when the lights were off and desks were empty, the virus sprang into action. It didn't just stay on that one computer. It began spreading, jumping from one machine to another across the entire bank's network. But this malware wasn't targeting just any device. It was on the hunt for something very specific, the one system that had control over everything. That's right, the admin computer. This was a digital control tower that had access to domain controllers, servers, internal software, and every piece of infrastructure bank relied on. And even for this powerful malware, reaching that admin system was no walk in the park. The corporate network was massive, thousands of interconnected devices, phones, printers, laptops, security systems. But the virus was stealthy, patient, and built to avoid detection. Eventually, after weeks of crawling quietly through the system, it found its target, the admin PC. And that's when things really started to spiral. Once the virus locked onto the admin computer, it began its attack. It didn't go loud right away. It kept things subtle at first. But then it started rapidly opening and closing dozens, even hundreds, of background apps all at once. The machine slowed to a crawl, almost grinding to a halt. The supervisor in charge of that workstation noticed the odd behavior and contacted the IT department for help. When one of the tech guys arrived, he asked her to reboot the system and log in again so he could take a closer look. And that's exactly what the malware had been waiting for. As soon as she typed in her username and password, the virus captured everything, every keystroke, every character. In that moment, it got full access to the admin credentials. That single move handed the attackers control of the bank's entire internal network. The IT specialist ran standard antivirus software, trying to diagnose the issue, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No red flags. No warnings. So he chalked it up to a minor glitch and walked away, unknowingly leaving the network wide open to one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks ever launched. Over the next 2 to 4 months, the virus lay low. It didn't interfere. It didn't steal. It just watched, recording everything that happened on the admin PC. It monitored wire transfers, ATM withdrawals, internal communications, phone conversations, and routine transactions. But there was a catch. Observing wasn't enough. If the hackers wanted to take over operations, they needed to access the most critical piece of the puzzle, the domain controller. This device was like the brain of the bank's entire digital body. It could control doors, cameras, servers, and even physical functions of ATM machines. If you had the domain controller, you basically had the keys to the castle. Eventually, the malware reached it. With full access in hand, it was time to cash in. Fast forward to July 8th, 2016. Two men, Sergei Borsky and Vladimir Berkman, landed in Taipei, Taiwan. They weren't hackers. In fact, they were just the money mules, tasked with a simple job: collect the cash. They rented a car, mapped out their targets, and drove to the first location. They casually stepped out, walked up to the ATM, and waited. No pins, no cards, no commands. Within seconds, the machine started ejecting huge amounts of money, like it had a mind of its own. The two men calmly collected the bills, packed them into their backpacks, and drove to the next spot, and then the next, and the next. Over the course of just 1 week, they made stops at 41 different hacked ATMs scattered throughout the city, collecting over $2 million in cash. Once their mission was complete, they headed to Taipei's main train station. There, they loaded the money into secure lockers and left without a trace. A short while later, two different men arrived, picked up the bags, and vanished into the city. But here's the thing: this wasn't an isolated job. Similar ATM incidents were happening across Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and parts of Western Europe, all at the same time. The Carbonac hacking group had figured out how to manipulate banks remotely, and the money was pouring in. But the operation wasn't just about ATMs anymore. The initial success had given them confidence, maybe even greed. Now they wanted more. Billions, not just millions. The problem? The core team of hackers was small. They didn't have the manpower to scale up the operation and reach their global ambitions. So they came up with a bold new plan. To pull off something this big, the hackers needed to expand, but they couldn't just post an ad saying, "looking for cyber criminals." So instead, they created a front, a fake tech company that looked completely legit. They called it Bastion Secure. On the surface, it appeared to be a professional cybersecurity firm. It had a polished website, corporate branding, a proper HR department, and a full organizational structure. Everything about it screamed legit business. They began posting job listings online, targeting skilled IT professionals with promises of high salaries, great benefits, and even the option to work remotely. For many applicants, the offer seemed like a dream opportunity. No one suspected a thing. Over time, they hired more than 60 employees from around the world. These recruits had no idea they were working for one of the world's most advanced cybercrime rings. Day in and day out, they performed what looked like standard IT tasks: monitoring systems, running diagnostics, managing data. But behind the scenes, they were helping fuel the group's global heist. The hackers began mimicking everything a real bank does: processing wire transfers, updating account balances, running financial simulations. But they had one major twist. They manipulated account data on a micro level. Let's say a customer had $4,000 in their account. Overnight, the balance might mysteriously bump up to $5,200. But by morning, the hackers would quietly pocket the difference, while the customer's original balance was restored, leaving no reason to complain. They didn't go for big, obvious changes. It was all about subtle, control fraud. Small amounts skimmed from thousands of accounts. Every day, across multiple countries. It flew under the radar for months. The operation was bringing in millions, quietly, consistently, and almost undetectably, until something unexpected happened. One night, during what was supposed to be a routine security check, the bank's head of IT stayed late at the office. While combing through logs from the domain controller, something strange caught his eye: encrypted data being transmitted to China. That single observation was enough to shake him to the core. He immediately picked up the phone and called the head of cybersecurity. But when asked to explain the situation, he refused to talk over the phone. He suspected that even their calls might be tapped. The cybersecurity lead jumped into his car and raced the bank, arriving in the dead of night. Together, the two experts sat down in front of the domain controller to investigate. To their shock, the computer was running commands on its own. It was launching programs, sending instructions completely autonomously. This wasn't just a glitch. It was something far more dangerous. To test their theory, they opened a blank Word document and typed just one word. Hello? Moments later, the machine typed back, Hi, you won't catch us. It was chilling. In that moment, they knew the entire network had been compromised. The realization hit hard. If the domain controller had been breached, the whole system was at risk. Total control had fallen into the wrong hands. Without wasting time, the head of security called for an emergency meeting with cybersecurity teams from several major international banks. He urged them to comb through their logs, check their systems, and prepare for the worst. Word spread fast. The hackers now had a name, Carbonac, and panic started to ripple through the global financial system. But even with this knowledge, tracking the malware wasn't easy. You see, Carbonac wasn't your typical virus. It used techniques like process masquerading, disguising itself as regular background programs like Explorer EXE or Coast EXE, making it nearly impossible to spot in a task manager. Even worse, it executed directly from memory. Memory-only malware, meaning it left no trace on the hard drive. Most antivirus programs at the time were only scanning disks, not RAM, so even the best tools couldn't detect it. They knew what was happening, but they had no idea who was behind it or how to stop it, until, by chance, something very unexpected happened back in Taipei. Remember those two money mules in Taipei, Sergey and Vladimir, during one of their late-night stops at an ATM? Things didn't go quite as planned. As they waited for the machine to start dispensing cash, a local man approached, just an ordinary citizen looking to withdraw money. When the two noticed they weren't alone, they panicked. In their rush to escape, they left behind the money already spewing from the ATM. Now, this bystander could have simply taken the cash and walked away. But instead, he did something else. He called the police. Taipei authorities were already on high alert, aware that banks across the world were under cyber attack. This strange ATM behavior triggered immediate suspicion. The investigation began right away. As police examined multiple ATM locations, they got a break. At one of the kiosks, they found an ID card dropped on the ground. It belonged to Sergei Borsky. Quickly, they tracked down the hotel he had been staying in, but it was too late. He'd already left the country and returned to Russia. Still, the investigation pressed on. Security footage later revealed Vladimir Berkman visiting Taipei's central train station, where he was seen stashing a backpack full of cash in a locker. This was it. The authorities finally had a real lead. They reviewed hours of CCTV footage throughout the city. Eventually, they tracked down the men who picked up the money and followed them to their hotel. Inside the room, they uncovered over $1.5 million in cash. The two men, Nikolai Penko and Mail Kababa, were arrested on the spot. Under intense questioning, the suspects gave up a name, Andrei Petrov. He was the team leader coordinating the cash pickups. Within days, police located and captured Petrov, who had hidden millions in a secluded spot in Dahu Park. But the investigation wasn't over yet. When police searched Petrov's phone, they discovered another name, Dennis K. At first, they assumed he was just another mule, but something didn't add up. Dennis K. had no background, no traceable footprint. It was as if he barely existed. And that's when the truth clicked. Dennis K. wasn't just another low-level player. He was the mastermind behind Carbonac. Now, the international community stepped in. Interpol, Europol, the FBI, and other agencies joined forces to bring him down. 2 years later, in 2018, a series of suspicious ATM incidents occurred in Spain. Eerily similar to the Taipei operation, investigators were tipped off that Dennis K. might be hiding in the coastal city of Alicante. They moved fast. A raid was launched on a luxury property. Inside, they found a stunning lifestyle, expensive cars, watches, and, sitting on a desk, a laptop containing 15,000 bitcoins, worth around $165 million at the time. Dennis K. was finally in custody. Banks across the world began tightening their cybersecurity. Systems were updated, protocols rewritten. The Carbonac Group was no longer invisible. But even today, whispers remain. The threat isn't completely gone. Somewhere out there, someone's still sending phishing emails, pretending to be an angry customer, waiting for someone to open the wrong file. And just like that, it could all begin again.